Toward the beginning of the year, I joined a gym in my neighborhood to get access to more equipment and also leave my apartment because I work from home and truly worry that I will become a hermit. And as I've put in a good chunk of time working out alongside my neighbors, I've noticed some very common mistakes in the gym. And I figured that means that you might also be making these common mistakes while you're working out. So today we're going to go through the top 3 mistakes I see happening around me in the gym, and I'm going to tell you how you can fix it. If you're unsure if you're making any of these mistakes, you can always take a video of yourself doing one of these exercises, send it to me over DMs on Instagram or email it to me. My email is always listed in the description box below, and I'm always happy to give you a little bit of feedback. But let's jump on into it. All right, if I still sound sick, by the way, it's because I am. I feel like there's just a whole series of videos of me complaining being sick, so that's that. Let's talk about an RDL. So an RDL, or a Romanian deadlift, this is essentially a deadlift where the weight is in your hands the whole time and you're starting and ending at the top. A conventional deadlift is when you're going to start at the bottom and end at the bottom, if that makes sense. So the biggest mistake I see with RDLs is the shin angle. And a lot of this comes from people going down too low too. So let me show you what I see a lot of the time. People send the butt back, and then to get more range of motion because they think that they're gonna get a better stretch on their hamstrings, they're pulling their knees back and reaching down toward the ankles. You can actually see now the hinge point has switched into my low back rather than my hips. That means you're gonna feel it a lot more in your low back and less in your glutes and your hamstrings. So ditch the weight so you can see my knees. Again, we want to aim for a neutral shin angle, meaning knee in line with the ankle. Everyone's anatomy is a little bit different. Some people have longer legs or shorter legs or longer femurs or tibias. So it's not gonna look 100% the same on every person, but that's kind of what we're aiming for, because once we come back here, now I'm putting more stress on the low back. So what I typically cue most people to do is think of sending the hips back first. You take a slight bend in your knees just to get some slack on the hamstrings. And most people just need to stop right below the knees and come back up. So we inhale down, weights shave the legs, and exhale, press back up. Now, if you're having trouble with that, I do have an entire video all about hip hinging that gives you different progressions, working your way up to actually adding weight to it. So definitely check that out. I will leave it linked down below. Next up, kettlebells. Not even an exercise, just like kettlebells. I see some truly wild shit. Let's just start with the thing that sets people up for failure is a racked position. So I will see people racking their kettlebells like this, like this. This hurts. So what's going on here? We're using the arm kind of as a support for the weight. That tells me that the weight is probably too heavy for you if you can't hold it in here without dipping over. In this position, we do not have any lat engagement, and I'm extending the wrist backwards. That's gonna put a lot of pressure on the wrist, and that's why a lot of times people do have wrist pain while using kettlebells. So instead, we wanna bring the weight up right in line with the chest. So I'm flexing my wrist forward, elbow is tucked in so I get my lat engaged, and I can get my core engaged as well. This is not only going to keep the bell from hitting on the side of your arm, it's going to get your shoulder a lot more stable, and it's gonna protect your wrist. So this is where we wanna start a lot of exercises. If we're doing overhead pressing, I'm not even gonna do that because my shoulder's already messed up right now. If we're overhead pressing from this position out here, this is so unstable on a ball and socket joint. We wanna create as much stability, keeping that point A to point B line as short, as succinct as possible. Otherwise, we're probably gonna hurt ourselves.
If you want a video on overhead pressing, I have that as well.
And here's the great thing about doing simple exercises like rows, overhead pressing, squats with kettlebells. You don't have to use them. So if they're a little too challenging for you based off of the weight, based off of the line of pull, simply switch back to dumbbells. There's no reason why we need to use kettlebells 100% of the time over dumbbells. It just doesn't always work that way for people and their strengths. All right, we're gonna, oh my God. Look at this wide angle. We're gonna dip it low, Christina Milian style, whoa.
Dip it low, bring it up slow. Is this a good angle? I don't know.
Kind of. The last exercise we're going to talk about are planks. The main thing that I see happening with planks is a lack of tension in the core. If we think about the main purpose of a plank, it is to work anti-extension of your core, meaning we're resisting doing this with our core. So flaring our rib cages, arching our low back. Your core can only hold a plank with tension for so long. So when you see people doing 3, 5, 10-minute planks, they're not really working their core for that amount of time they're more so shifting the focus into their shoulders, into the hips, into the knees, into the quads, into the low back, like all of these places where, sure, you can do a plank for that reason, but there's much more efficient ways to work all of those other muscle groups rather than just holding a plank. So that's the first caveat on planks that I would like to talk about. Now let's look at some of the form things that I see happening. We're gonna start with the shoulders. Quite often, I see this happening where we're sinking into the shoulder sockets, or from a high plank, we're sinking into the shoulder sockets. So what I want you to do is come down to the knees and practice dipping onto your shoulders and then pressing the floor away. And you can see I'm creating space in my upper back. Same thing, we can do that same drill on the forearms. And you should actually feel your lats turn on as you're doing that press, really trying to bring your lats, like you're trying to put them into your back pockets. So if we now bring this into a plank position, we can sink it down, press the floor away. You're gonna feel a lot more stable through your shoulders as you go into your plank work. Now moving down to the hips, the other thing that I see is sinking into the hips. This does not work your core, this works your low back, like crunching it to death. So what I want you to think about is pinching your shoulder blades together, tuck your hips under. Same thing in our high plank. If we're here, we don't have any core tension. A good drill, if you are having trouble creating that core tension, I'm gonna show you with a foam roller because it's in the room, but I usually prefer a yoga block, a Pilates ball, even a pillow could work. You can squeeze something between your inner thighs, and that's gonna help remind your core that it has to stay on. And I've said this 1,000 times before, in terms of plank work, I guess it depends on the variation, but you really don't need any more than like 30 seconds to a minute. Anything more than that, it's not your core working, it's gonna be your shoulders, it's gonna be your low back. It's gonna be all of these things that you don't necessarily need to be doing a plank to get the most bang for your buck. All right, that was fun, short and sweet. We'll see how short it was when I edit it back. Again, these are 3 of the most common things that I see happening in the gym around me. Obviously, there's a lot more mistakes that could be made, but I also want you to remember that making mistakes is part of the process. Even if I go back to like videos from a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I will cringe sometimes at my form on things, and that's okay. Learning is part of the process. I always phrase to people, we're not trying to be perfect, we're trying to practice, and we're trying to get better at things. So I don't want you to think that if you made one of these mistakes that I am shaming you or that your exercise was a waste of time. I simply want to empower you with more knowledge so that you understand how to get the most bang for your buck out of the movement that you're doing. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them down below. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, and I will see you all in the next one.